accessibility section. And with me today is Lindsay Hausinger, Rebecca Young, and Sean Moan, who you might have seen outside, directing you all folks to come inside. So I think a lot of you might have been at the first workshop. So thank you again for attending that and providing your feedback and being here today for this second workshop. So just a quick agenda for today's meeting. We'll be going over just some of the existing conditions that we confirmed based off of our observations, as well as a review of the comments that you all provided to us in the last meeting. We'll also be going over those recommendations that you had given us, and then some of the data that we had collected and reviewed to really come up with some potential additional measures as part of this phase 2 study and help address the issues that you all identified in that last meeting. So this is just a map of what's there today. So you all have some left turn restrictions that were recently installed on National, at home in Schaefer. There's speed humps, as well as some temporary roundabouts that were in place along Higuera Street. This was done as part of the phase 1 neighborhood traffic management plan. And there were also some subsequent improvements that were done in coordination with the city, including the always stop at Kruger and Ince. So this kind of just gives an outline of what's there today and some of the measures. We'll go on later in the presentation on what else can be done to help address your issues. So this is just a recap of some of the comments that you provided. So some of the issues that were identified in our last meeting and as part of the phase 1 study related to cut through traffic, speeding, safety of pedestrians and bicyclists, and just overall congestion that you experience living in the neighborhood. And then some recommendations that you all provided to us to address those issues that included cul-de-sacs, better signage, better crosswalk, signage and striping to improve visibility, as well as more enforcement. So based on the recommendations and feedback you provided, we collected some data, which included traffic counts, speed data. We did field observations in your neighborhood a couple months ago, as well as last month, during like the peak periods when commuter traffic is really the heaviest, cut through traffic is the heaviest, to kind of just confirm everything that you've all told us. You guys have a lot of cut through traffic. There are folks who bypass the roundabouts and don't go all the way around. Sometimes being a pedestrian, there are folks who decide that they don't want to stop for you. So they do fail to yield to the pedestrian. So those are the types of things that we noticed when we were doing some field observations. We also, so the red dots you see on the map is everywhere we took intersection counts. So we collected counts in the morning peak period. So that's the 7 to 9 hour, the midday period, 12 to 2, and then the afternoon period, which is 4 to 6. So those are the ones we were using the red dots. Where you see the blue line is where we collected daily traffic counts, so a 24-hour count in both directions, as well as speed data. So we're collecting just how fast people are traveling on your street throughout the day. And just some of the things that we found in reviewing the data, there's a lot of cut through traffic that's going through your neighborhood. We would say, based on our review of some model data, as well as the data that we collected, there's about 30 to 70% of the traffic on your streets are considered cut through trips. A lot of that we were seeing was on Lucerne, was on Schaefer. There was an increase in 80, which is average daily traffic on Lucerne, so we do recognize that. And we saw it with our own eyes, a lot of cars were using that for a cut through route, as well as all the other streets in the neighborhood. They were actively used as cut through routes. the left turns from National to Helms and Schaefer, they did reduce with the left turn signage prohibiting peak hour turns. That was effective, but there are still folks that are using your street as a cut through route just because the sign can only do so much. Something that we found when looking at the speed data, there are instances where folks are speeding down your streets. However, for the most part, the speeds didn't exceed 7 miles per hour or more over the posted speed limit, which is typically the threshold that's used by the city for speed hump installation. So although it doesn't meet it today, it could meet it in the future. But that's just something we wanted to know. And then, oh yeah, and then we also did notice that there are a lot of folks that are coming in from Washington through to Higuera that are using your neighborhood to cut through. They're also coming in from Hayden Higuera, bypassing the diverter that's there today. So those are things that are relevant to some of the measures that we'll be proposing later in this next slides. And then, as I mentioned earlier, when we were out there observing us walking, there were drivers who failed to yield to us. So we had to be extra careful when crossing the streets along Higuera. And this is a little bit hard to read, but this will be on the website. This is a summary of all the speed data that we collected over the 4-day period. So we collected data Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then on a Saturday. So this shows the 85th percentile speed along these street segments, so a total of 17 street segments. So as you can see, none of them actually exceeded the 7 mile per hour threshold over the speed limit. And they're all generally consistent, as you can see in this next slide, with what was measured back in 2018 as part of the phase 1 study. This chart here provides you a summary of the average daily traffic comparisons between the phase 1 data back in 2018 and then what was collected recently in 2015. So you can see that there has been some decreases in traffic on some streets, but generally it's been pretty consistent, except for Lucerne where we do see an increase. For Lucerne, a 10% increase. Yes. Yes, you're correct. Maybe need to just update that. And then here, just to show a comparison, as I mentioned earlier, we did see a drop in the left turns from National on to go traveling southbound onto Schaefer and Helms. So you see it was greatest in the morning peak hours, and that did drop. There are still folks that go against the signage that's there prohibiting, but it has dramatically decreased. And then we did also, I think I mentioned earlier, we looked at model data to kind of help us understand what the cut-through routes are in the area and what people are using and how they're trying to travel through their neighborhood to get to where they need to go. So this is kind of just to highlight how people are coming from the south to try to get to Washington and National to the north. So they're coming up Lucerne, they're using Higuera, and as they're coming up Lucerne and then going to Higuera and Inns to try to get to Washington, to try to get to National. And then Schaefer, we saw that was also used as a major route. And then in the opposite direction, kind of same thing. We're seeing that Lucerne was really heavily utilized to travel southbound to get from National and Washington down to the southern areas. So just a quick refresh of the improvements that were implemented as part of the phase 1 study. So you have the left turn restrictions along National. There's some roundabouts that have been put in, as well as always stop control, as well as some pedestrian signage along Inns. We know they're not the flashing ones, they're just signage and like the yield striping. But we did note that those were put in. And then these next slides just provide you with just some pictures that I'm sure you all are familiar with. There is a video here, but I don't think I can put it in the clicker. Okay, so we took data, we looked at the recommendations that you all provided, as well as just the issues that you all identified related to traffic. And we came up with kind of a menu of strategies. I know this is hard to read up here, but you'll have a chance to review it. It'll be uploaded to the website. But we're really focused on vehicle traffic calming, pedestrian safety, and bicycle safety. So vehicle traffic calming, we want to make your streets less attractive for commuters that are just cutting through. We want to be able to slow them down, make it longer for them so that they're not actually saving any time by traveling through your neighborhood. But we need to remember that there are trade-offs to that. It's going to take a commuter that's cutting through long, but it's also going to take you as a resident of the neighborhood just as long. So it may be more direct today, but once these measures are put in, they could also add to your travel time and your route back home. So just things to think about when you give us your feedback on whether you like something or you don't like something. And then we also don't want to solve an issue for one street, but just push it over to another street, because that doesn't really help everybody in the neighborhood. So some of the things that we've included are turn and through restrictions at the intersections. We want to maintain the peak hour left turn restrictions that were installed as part of the phase one study, because that we are seeing that it's been effective. We want to improve and try to make it more effective with the roundabouts. You know, as we mentioned earlier, that folks are bypassing it, or it doesn't really slow folks down because they're still not adhering to the yield for the pedestrians. We want to be able to upgrade maybe some of the two-way stops to all-way stops. So it really pauses or forces folks to stop at every single intersection and slow them down. And as part of that, we could also upgrade those to flashing stop signs, similar to what's at Lucerne and Higuera today. Something else that we can think about are things to slow folks down and to give the perception that your street is narrower. So something that's already been done on like Wesley, those are considered edge line striping to give kind of like a narrowing effect. Other things that we looked at were full and half closures of streets. So you may be able to go northbound toward Higuera on a street, however, you can't go southbound towards Ince. So we'll show you some concept maps of what we came up with. We'll also, once this is over, give you a chance to give us your feedback. Tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. And then for pedestrian safety, we want to make it safer. So make you as a pedestrian more visible. So something that we can think about are flashing pedestrian signs, upgraded crosswalks, or more crosswalks to make you more visible as a pedestrian when vehicles are coming through. And then for bicycle safety, we can also look at bike sharrows. I know they've been painted in some of the other streets within the neighborhood, but we can think about maybe adding them on Ince and then maintaining them on Higuera. So you'll have a better look. We have some printouts of these plans, but so we have 3 concept plans. So I don't have a pointer, but you'll see we have restrictions at Washington and Higuera, so folks aren't using it as like a through movement to go from left to right on Higuera. So limiting throughs from the freeway and then from Washington as well. Upgrading the pedestrian signage along Higuera to be more visible. And then also potentially having a closure at Hayden and Higuera so that it really cuts off folks that are trying to use Higuera to go towards Washington. Also included in here is the edge lines that I mentioned earlier along Helms and Schaefer. So do you see where there's like the 3 circles with the arrows at Washington and Higuera? Okay, so we're proposing to restrict southbound from Robertson to Higuera, and then the turns from Washington to Higuera. Yeah, I don't know if I'm following too much, but we can have Sean do that. It's showing up there, so I'm not gonna show it.
Oh,
Yeah.
you can't run the mouse.
Yeah.
So, this is, I'm not gonna be able to actually touch it. Talking about Washington.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's, Washington is the big band that runs the diagonal. And it's around that resembles the like turning restrictions. Have you located it on the map? Is that helpful or not?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and I think what Emily was alluding to, I just walked in, but I think the idea was in order to really reduce the amount of cut through traffic that's originating in that location, what this concept is proposing are prohibition of through traffic, and then also a prohibition of right turns from Washington onto Higuera and left turns from Washington onto Higuera. So effectively eliminating that as a point of ingress. One thing to note that would also be applicable to any residents would not be allowed to utilize those corridors to ingress at that point. Is that clarified?
So we're commuting home, get off the freeway, get off of Robertson. I want to get home. How am I supposed to do that?
That's a great question. With any of the concepts that we're going to put forward, what the community members, residents will have to recognize is that any measures that are implemented that really are designed to discourage cut-through traffic are also going to reduce the opportunities that you'll have to access your neighborhood. And that's why, again, that's why presenting these measures and getting feedback from the community, both for and against, is the right way to go about this type of evaluation. And it often occurs that residents who tend to utilize facilities more often that end up with really restrictive measures implemented are against it, while residents who live in another area are all for it. Yeah, there are varying degrees of measures that can be implemented to discourage cut-through traffic while not completely eliminating it because there are no physical barriers. Residential traffic only is one type of signage that, you know, could be implemented. And you could evaluate, do kind of the data collection after that level of implementation, and then evaluate whether or not the community thinks more restrictive measures are necessary based on the results of that. Did you talk about the turning restrictions on national land? Okay, so she talked about the turning restrictions implemented on national. Those were found to have an effect, a reductive effect of people making that left turn into the neighborhood. It didn't completely eliminate it because people still do it illegally. But that's the type of hierarchical approach that could be considered as we consider different measures to address speeding or cut through traffic, as a way to ever sort of implement low-hanging measures, evaluate their effectiveness, come back if we think that the appropriate level of reduction, whether it's cut-through reduction or reduction of speeding or reduction of pedestrian and vehicular conflicts, see if additive measures aren't then necessary. And I think the city's on board with that approach as well. And what we're trying to present here, and then we're just on concept plan A, are different types of measures that could be implemented throughout the neighborhood at varying degrees that could start to address the the impacts as conveyed by you and as we identified through our data collection and observations. Does that make sense?
Is it restricting traffic flow in both directions?
You can go out.
You can go out.
Yeah.
Yeah, this measure would just restrict traffic coming in. So you would still have a relief valve to, correct,
But still access. Less
correct.
eco.
Yeah, it's much less, restricted than the signage. That's much less restricted than like implementing a cul-de-sac, for example, like a full closure, which has its own design issues.
Sorry, can you clarify the restriction here? It's kind of, block people from coming off of Washington for the area, but Robertson paid for the freeway exit.
That particular scheme is illustrated, represents restrictions from all three legs of the intersection. So it's through traffic and the turning movements on Washington. There certainly could be, as we look at the data closer, there certainly could be varying degrees of that, but maybe just restricting through traffic or just restricting one or two of the turning movements.
Except for the morning.
That would be all day, but it could be a peak hour restriction.
We have some example routes just to kind of show you what these measures mean as for you as somebody who lives with. And that's the feedback we got.
Yeah, and one of the, all of the concepts that we put up kind of start mid-level and go north. There's probably a sort of a preliminary initial concept that could be put forward that focuses on discouragement through additive stop locations. I mean, what we're trying to do is make the route through the neighborhood either prohibited or make it so undesirable because it actually takes longer than it would have if you had just stayed on Washington and stayed on National, et cetera.
It just, I don't think we're doing one thing, just creating micro problems without solving larger because there's a lot of businesses coming to Culver now. There's a lot of offices off of Higuera. So there is this, right, other movement of natural traffic coming in that I guess what's the incremental impact we're trying to have, trying to solve for, as people that haven't been involved.
Yeah, I would say that there are two big issues that this neighborhood traffic management plan is attempting to address. And what we're trying to do is get to the point where there's a concept plan that the neighbors want to move forward. Input from the community, residents such as yourself, is critical. But the primary issue, I don't want to call one primary and secondary. The two primary issues are commuters utilizing residential streets to bypass and avoid congestion on the collector streets and arterials that were designed to handle commuter traffic. So that's the cut through aspect of it. And that typically is exacerbated during the AM commuter peak period and the morning peak period and in the afternoon peak period when people are going home. The second issue, which is equal important to the community, as evident by comments we've received during this process and before, are safety issues related to speeding, safety issues related to not enough traffic controls and resulting in vehicular and pedestrian conflicts, particularly on Higuera and to a slightly lesser extent, and then some of the corridors that connect to residential corridors that connect to Higuera and national. So it's a safety issue. And one of the things we've tried to do with this is put together measures that start to address either one or both of those for consideration by the community, recognizing that this will also impact residents potentially.
Business there or the
But
company that display a mark.
Did that multiple years ago. We did
Yeah.
that multiple years ago. They had to make changes on Washington, and they made changes on several other streets that were from Grandis. And so we've come out of that, and now we're trying to do others.
I'm specifically talking about the big buildings and new businesses that have recently opened at the end of the year.
Correct.
So I was just wondering if you've spoken to them recently.
Those were. In the redevelopment, that was.
No, Apple, Alo,
Right.
the restaurant down there.
Well, they were all supposed to exit paid to the national pay. That's why we have the barrier. That's because they're an industrial park and more residential.
Yeah.
And there's a difference.
and I'm sure that as part of
These
this,
buildings have been opened up, but I'm wondering if you've spoken to them.
Well, it's not their choice. We're the residential.
yes, I'm sure as part of the entitlement process for those developments, there was some level of community engagement and some direction by city staff, and restrictions, access restrictions put on those businesses that would divert traffic back to the corridors that were designed to handle commuter traffic. What we've seen in our data collection is sometimes that gets bypassed and they're filtering back to the residential area. There's probably some measure that the city could take to remind them what they're permitting them. But at the same time, there are still measures that should be implemented to address just other aspects that could potentially not even be related to commuter traffic. Speeding is a global issue. Right, so it's that the restrictedness of again, these varying levels of measures, and they're myriad. We put together 3 concept plans. I think we have 20 sketched out. I think based on the feedback I heard from that gentleman, it probably is really worth our while to put together a very basic phase 2 plan that is minimally restricted to the residents, but still trends towards addressing these issues. So that would be something that we should do.
Let's
ASAP.
go through our next few.
Yeah, and I'll let Emily continue the presentation.
In stages of that phase 1. Phase 2, but where it basically starts and ends is that our residential communities from steady forward down to shape. And when we get clean that in the big place, that becomes industrial traffic, which doesn't really. We are not even trying to, other than big neighbors, right? Our concern tonight for this neighborhood facility, not to necessarily cater to their needs, but to ours.
Yeah, no, yeah, I
A
was
long
very
standing.
campaigning for that.
Yes.
Them and the businesses on cheaper, and just to help them advocate to their employees that these are restrictions and remind them.
Right.
I just don't know what's happening. And you know, noisy people, really, they don't want to hear complaints about it.
They,
Can I say something? I'm one of the originators of the Rancho Higuera neighborhood association. You feel that so I've been doing neighborhood start in when I moved in, I'm on the corner of Hudson and Higuera Street. When I moved in, there was about 18,000 cars there across my house. But I nearly canceled my escrow and escrow. I still had the car. I wasn't looking. The area was going down on a big time. So what happened is we formed the Rancho Higuera neighborhood association, we got together with the city council. And as a result of that paving put in, that reduced the grant from 8,000 to 10,000 for the change the neighborhood. I mean, this neighborhood would not be what it is today, it was today. I mean, value will not be down with respect to all the side streets. A lot of people think that if our problem, you know, only our problems in Gera and maybe on the people, that's not really a concern. But it's really everybody's problem, so it affects everybody. If nobody can buy in high street, then it affects the side street, so everything goes down the hill. So it's, easy to implement the tremendous upside to this whole thing. One of the things we wanted originally was a cul-de-sac at Navy and Higuera. That is too much, and we talked about now addressing that particular commercial area. We did, yeah, the one at the time. That was just too much for them at the time. They didn't want that cul-de-sac. Because we always maintained that was a separate community for us. And it is. If you look at that, you'll see, you know, the residents and you see the commercial around us. But in effect, cutting them off to a certain degree would be an answer, and then if we go out to national. By the way, national, when I moved in there, was a major two street, like it used to be, and it had less traffic than Gera Street had. Because they on the street, but they forgot to divert the traffic. So all that work in retrospect, we actually had national was godsend, it would actually work when you take over the traffic in our area. So going back to this, you know, the working needs on each side. That's something we probably have to readdress again, but what I'm trying to emphasize is that constantly one of the things we've had in the community is that if somebody would drive up in the 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it's been very difficult to get it from centers enough to do some of the stuff we really need to do to get this traffic down to reasonable size. And what I'm going to say, it really affects everybody. Safety, it's speed, all sorts of things. It really, everybody thinks they're not affected that. So, it's ultimately restricting you. So again, you mentioned it, you're really able to for a long time with that single second. And that's going to be another thing, we're going to have to look for the business, because then I'm not like it, but then, you know, they've got a lot of other things, and maybe that is something, another something. Considering that, but that would make a major difference to isolating our residential area. And yes, it may be between the here and there, and it's spread the whole area. So that's what bring back to the sort of perspective of this.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but on concept plan A, you guys have a potential cul-de-sac on Hayden and Higuera, is that one of the things?
Yeah, so we do, if you look, there's that blue aqua looking line, next to Hayden here, so that's what we're, a full closure there.
That's paper into Hayden.
So then we would have the measures along Schaefer to try to narrow it, to try to make it a lesson. So that's the kind of trade-offs we need to think about.
That's.
Down, traffic went down. So that was sort of and that's one thing the city said is, when that bridge down goes down, what's going to happen? We're going to kind of see that. Now, the pandemic happened as well, so it wasn't quite perfect. But when that bridge went back in, instant increase of cars. So that is your barrier. So we can see what is actually happening in real time. Right now, it's just a funnel coming out, you know, off the freeway right into our.
Yeah, typically what occurs with a lot of these measures is you do a temporary mock-up. So it's a quick build closure to see what kind of effects that actually, we could project all day long. But one of the things that we were concerned about with the full cul-de-sac was, we know from the data collection, when we put in the turning restrictions on Helms and Schaefer, that traffic shifted to Wesley, left turns increased on Hayden, so it went to the edges. We also know from the data collection that the Hayden to the Higuera move, especially in the morning, is heavy. So people are coming down Hayden and the divergence so allows you to utilize Higuera coming from that direction. So if it looks like a physical barrier, whether that's a cul-de-sac or a half closure, is the consensus of the community, you would do a quick build and you see what kind of downstream effect or upstream effect that would have on residents not immediately adjacent. That is the biggest issue with the consensus on this.
We might make it a worst.
It's something that we also,
That was a little bit extra, with the already whatever, it's going to be the case. And
Yeah.
it really needs to be looked at as a whole.
Yeah, that's, my personal opinion, having been doing this for a long time, is it the implementation of the low hanging fruit measures and approaching this iteratively, especially when there are significant opposing numbers of opinion is really the way to go. In turn up the heat a little bit, make it a little bit less desirable, start to see that has an effect. It gets to a point where the community can live with it, or you want to go over. There are obviously some interior closures that we can discuss that would probably be more desirable from a global consensus standpoint. But that permeability, that residential permeability, those measures, that is always the biggest issue when it comes to building a consensus among neighborhood groups, especially even though it's a relatively, I mean, there's some geographic nuance to. Yeah.
yeah, we'll flip through them really. You know, we've been on concept A, but just want to highlight that we're looking at this as for a full neighborhood. It's not just cutting it off at Hayden Higuera. We've also tried to cut them off at Lucerne.
I'm just Schaefer, and then you're saying, I go.
Yeah, so these are the kind of,
I go by that parody.
Yeah.
I realize that, we have a speaker, but the way the traffic used to be, we could put in the barrier before we did the sign mitigation. It was, we were the off ramp and on ramp for ours. That's the whole neighborhood. It was constant, it was wall to wall traffic coming down every street and on Higuera for 2 hours every morning and every week. And so the things that we've done have been really great. And like I say, with the bridge, we kind of saw it. Okay, here's a kind of through.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you can still, we just went around on the border.
Right.
Right.
So I told there was a people who didn't go to the street. I said, yeah.
Okay.
But your concept of not being able to come into the area, could we flip this to not being able to exit the area? So that we could actually get home. And the other thing is that you're gonna divert us to Washington, down ends, that's not really solving. And that corner at Instant, Washington is a night. I mean, that's just so wrong. And you have a circle at Lucerne and Higuera, and there's no such thing. See, we put in the plan years ago, 30 years ago, when Simon was talking about it. The only thing that happened in phase 1 is they got a little bigger. And I see a circle at Lucerne.
Yeah, you can see on the graphic when we zoom in, that's just that circle is different, it's a stop sign. So that's an illuminated stop sign symbol, sorry. We didn't realize we were gonna be this far away.
Yeah, far away.
Kind of walked in and said, how are we doing? Yeah, go ahead.
Some of these are really limited time. Can we just let Emily finish the
Yes.
presentation and save all the questions for the end?
Yes.
okay, we'll go through this really quickly. So you'll kind of see the differences as I flip through in the different measures that we've proposed. So you'll see along Higuera and so we've gone from pedestrian crosswalks and upgraded on ends to flashing stop signs, 4-way stops. We've also maintained some of the half closures. So we have a half closure on ends and Lucerne, Lindblade and Higuera and Wesley and just south of National, just to try to limit folks from using your neighborhood on those heavily traffic cut through routes. And then our next concept is concept plan C, where you see we've upgraded all the stops along Higuera to be always stop signs, as well as on INTs, to really try to slow folks down. So they're stopping at every single intersection. So they're not just breezing past the roundabouts that are there today. Also, I know we mentioned the speed humps and the speeds that we've reported along the streets aren't meeting the thresholds for speed humps today, but that doesn't mean that it's out of question for the future. So we could always look at speeds in the future to see if it's something that's warranted. So that's something that we've included here along Culver and Helms and Schaefer, as well as some of the half closures that we were proposing in the previous plans. To kind of just give you an idea of how these plans will affect your travel every day, multiple times a day. So here's kind of your existing route. So if you live on Wesley, you have a really direct route to National. Same thing if you live on Lucerne, you have a direct route to Washington along Inns. And then if you're on Kruger, there's kind of nothing to keep you from going directly to Washington. So under concept A, we've shown just kind of how your route gets changed. So rather than going directly through to National from Wesley, you now have to kind of circulate around, and you being a resident kind of know your way around, as you mentioned. The same thing with Kruger, if we have some restrictions that limit you from coming into the neighborhood from Robertson, now you have to circulate around to get back home. So if you see the orange line, you can get out of your neighborhood, right, directly to Washington. And then if you see it's a little hard to see here, I apologize. There's like that dashed orange line just south on Inns. Rather than coming directly in from Washington, you now have to take Inns to Culver to get to your house. So Wesley, we have a half closure, so folks can't come in to Wesley from National. So there'd be a half closure there, just south of the school. So you can't come into your neighborhood, but you can go out. So now you'll have to circulate around to get onto National. So either from Hayden from Helms or from Schaefer. So it kind of just gives you an idea of like how each of these plans would affect your everyday travel route. You couldn't get to Wesley from Schaefer. From National, sorry. So you can't go down. Yes, the left turn restrictions would be maintained. And then just really quick, I'll go through for concept plan B, just kind of what the differences you'll see in the routes. And then concept plan C, just some different, how your routes change here. And just to kind of, those are our plans, so we can give you a better opportunity to look at them closely on these printouts. Just a reminder that some of these improvements are easier to implement than others, just because some measures do require some additional technical justification. So they require a little bit more review, whereas like stop signs and painting and striping don't require so much additional review. So they are a little bit easier for us to work with the city to install. Our next steps are to take your feedback on these concept plans, refine it, and then do a detailed analysis of what you tell us you like and what you don't like, and then see how it affects the overall traffic patterns. And so we'll refine these plans, and for our next meeting, we'll provide you a review of the refined concepts. Your comments can be sent to this this email address. I know it's a little hard to see, but it's traffic.engineering@culvercity.org. And then there's a website here with where all of these slides and the presentation, today's meeting will be uploaded.
Excuse me, what is the feedback do?
Yes. I mean, we need to check in with Andrew, but I think that might be it because the holidays are coming up in the next couple months. So I think we might pick this back up beginning of next year.
So reasonably by me.
Yeah, I would say at the end of December.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see.
Giving us time to.
Yes.
The information.
We our position is this ultimately is your plan. So that's why we're going to get definitely feedback. We need to get a certain amount of feedback right. Start the next iteration of this and put together some refined concepts that really speak to a higher order approach that can pivots off the feedback. Recognizing that one of the concepts probably includes some closures that need to be discussed as a community. What you read upon falls into this.
On the pictures, like, so we actually see what's been around the streets.
We do have some of those that didn't make it into the presentation. As far as comments go, for anything you would like to see zoomed up, you can constantly be uploading additional exhibits. That help you conceptualize that, even on a giant screen like this, you can more.
I'm also thinking this evening, I'm sorry, it's the thank you for the closure.
Oh, yes, we're done.
I'll just want to ask one more question also. I thought that second workshop was also going to give us additional feedback as opposed to seeing something that may already happen at a finite point. Two or three things I came up with since workshop one, we haven't discussed at all. A lot of residents are very concerned about our parking signs because we don't go downtown Culver City. We have 2-hour parking and people will park all day long on a residential street. So that was a concern. Anything we can do this change of phase two. If we're not giving speed counts on some of the streets, which I feel we have commands in the air for it, we need to discuss maybe some other new ideas that residents that didn't attend workshop one might want to add.
Yeah, that's
We have
what we're here for.
those ideas and expressions of thought, if there's any.
I do want to say that we have 7 points of ingress in this neighborhood, which is exactly why we have all this traffic. If we got rid of 2 and we still had 5 to get in, that seems pretty like a no-brainer to me. I can go around, I can take another couple of turns. But obsessing over the way we travel in as we do it now, to spiders faces kind of idea, I just suggest that we just say, oh yeah, I can take a right over here rather than going straight. And it suddenly reduces our traffic by 70%. I mean, I think that's pretty good. But my question is, I saw there's an entire plan coming up for Hayden Track as well. Are we taking that into account when we do this? And I guess that's also why we're blocking it off, because that's going to throw quite a bit based off of what I'm seeing. Also, my last time I was here, I'm just going to say a couple of things that you can address. The CERN going towards Duquesne, I'd ask you to please look at that as part of our neighborhood, because that's where the kids go from our neighborhood to the school, and the traffic is insane, and they're not kind to the bike riders. So that's my.
That they're considering from in-school to that.
Was it parking, permit parking? Was that something the same?
Yeah. Permit parking is
All they're doing is trying to pack, just stay down, saying they're get like,
That's
sometimes
the permit parking.
sometimes the cars die, but it's oncoming traffic.
Oh, okay, so it's.
Straight on with the cars.
It could be, just to make it,
It has light.
sorry, this is,
And it's very good.
We need to, I know it's not technically part of it, we need to look at.
Because there's already one building that's being planned for 3 stories, all office space. So all those people are gonna be coming from Washington or from the west side and into that area, through Higuera and into Hayden, if it's not one. And then in the evening, they'll all be coming back out because it's across from where the Jag Gym was. I don't think the building has a name. But yeah, just if we're doing this, can we take all of that into account at the same time? Because that would be really nice to have the city or to have the people building the buildings over there, because multiple other buildings are slated for demolition and office space is going in and possibly mixed use, residential and office space. So all those people going to the Hayden Track are going to be coming to our streets if we don't go. But the thing is, so we can't get through to the business side. So if we, and a lot of them, I think, would use, light rail. If they had the option of not being dropped off over there, but the office over there, so we just can drive the car. But if we could hit up the city to make those businesses also all combined for shuttle bus. Go back and forth every 15 minutes, half hour, from the light rail station and just circulate the three-lane track. Just keep going all day long, get people back at the end, and then get them off.
So that added demand due to that development was something in the back of our minds as we looked at whether or not to keep moving forward with the potential closure of that location. We would need to take a closer look at the issue you raised about decaying, so we'll endeavor to do that with the data collection.
Lucerne.
Lucerne, two decay, yeah, that, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that was fun.
The parking, if she want, the reason that aggressive. Is that the parking, they can't be a second plus, probably text, I didn't, not part of this, so we didn't settle in the city. That was sort of pulled out, so that could be just a parking plus as far as.
We really put on the table, but I thought there would be some more stronger on this programs. Managing residential sites.
We'll bring that back.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it has been brought forth and signs remain 2 hours to the last, 30 something.
Yeah. And as far as the closure on Figueroa is concerned, it's probably not right at the end of the block. It's probably somewhere mid-block that sort of gives some of those commercial entities that do have some driveways on that end of Higuera. That's probably the appropriate place for it. So we had some conversations with the city about that and what that could potentially look like. What we're trying to do now is, what's that? Well, this is really designed to prevent people coming from the Washington side, cutting through Higuera to access that commercial development. So that's what that cul-de-sac,
Not a one.
partial closure.
Just do one of these, you're correct, but if we do two, then there's no reason for them to even come in, should.
I don't, maybe we have to look at the map.
There's 7 entrances to the.
No, but not where I go.
There- 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way around, it's a circle of entrances.
I take Higuera and turn left on Hayden and right on Warner, and I want to be able to do that because that's the direction I need to.
Right, so you might have to change that, so you can get 70% less cars in your street.
I don't want to add that to my commute.
Oh.
I also don't want all of it. I don't want to turn into.
All right, and that's where that's the problem, right?
Yeah, shape for the nap, so now it's probably maybe wants to this.
Oh,
You just go the other end of the street. So this, instead of the.
and then when I come back from 40 out, like I go all the way.
Yeah.
And then one with the closures.
Come up because that's fine if there.
Closure to the Hayden Trail.
Depends on.
Yeah.
And then we could have these.
Here, there's really nobody can.
I get it.
Yeah, people can come in.
Can I ask two questions?
If we close it here, then that
First
makes
one,
it.
for example,
They can still get
that closure, like, if you exit the school, you're asked to turn left.
Yes,
So is that like concrete chunk?
so it'd be an improvement to what's there today.
Okay,
Yeah.
oh, that's not like an example of that.
We probably got to add them to these.
Okay.
What happened? It's not a improvement. Capital, you're really a perfect extension. Paying for time to travel.
Okay, and then, second one. Okay. Second question is more for the audience. On Higuera. I don't think I've ever seen a street have more street signs. And so I just wonder, do people think that there's like a point of saturation? There's so many signs. There's, hey, here's a walkway, which is on both sides. Here's the speed you should be traveling at. Here's very small fonts of the parking available on a street.
I'm just wondering, is that a way of trying to like get people to not drive on that street? I just find it as I couldn't possibly be driving safe and reading every sign.
It's kind of a perfect example of, let's try the most minimally invasive measures. That will address safety and speed.
Okay,
Like, hey, watch out for pedestrians.
cool.
I'm a big proponent, I don't live in the neighborhood, but in my neighborhood, I was all for just put a stop sign in every section. You shouldn't want to, it's safe. Rather than, I think they're a straight shot from Washington, almost 2%. We're speeding and now they're beating around. And all that.
Sure.
I would like to see you guys but if not all stop signs, at least some more stop signs to really start to meter that traffic. Slow down the time it takes to get to the neighborhood, make it safe for pedestrians and cyclists.
Is that the message?
That's kind of that's one of the things that's sort of up for consideration.
It was for the safety, that's why we had, we had the crosswalks, it was really difficult to cross the street, so.
We didn't stop.
Yeah, it was just,
I've got a crosswalk, then we can stop.
yeah, it's.
So the
No.
flash and stop sign, I think are great. Yes, sir.
With Jim Dave, who was a previous director of public works, talked about the and one of the things that it has true emergency exits, fire exits. Now, every 4 miles, so people are in the exit. So it's not important. What's the time? There's 2 fire. Together anytime. Emergency or anything. Most people aren't there. You need to drive over to. From the sort of it. Fire trucking, ambulance, anything. So.
So along with this, I'm sure collectively would like to see was enforcement of some of the measures that are already in place, some of the rules. I think that's. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's gotta be,
Yeah.
that's why they were put there.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it, in fact, you had some sort of a problem. But in fact, if you've got no way to get out of it. It's a dead loss. Now, it's sure that the people are building the new story. Modernized building, but utilize. Parking, exits, anything. But
Yeah, I think, at least I know from an access standpoint, I think all those driveways have to stay restricted, like emergency access only.
yeah, you gotta go to a line.
Yeah.
Guaranteeing no use to.
Yeah, we'll definitely convey that to the city. If you could provide a comment, that would carry more, a written comment, that would also carry more weight.
Yeah, I live on Culver Street. It's become a nightmare over the last year or so, for the studio traffic cutting through. What is the proposed, is there a proposal right now for Culver Street between Ents and Higuera?
Yeah, I think what's been proposed to date, which was primarily, I think some of the initial issues that were raised were really revolved around speeding. And certain amount of cut through was to look at whether or not it warranted speed humps, which we found it didn't, but as Emily indicated, can revisit that at any time. And then some of the other things to calm traffic was the lane striping, the edge lines. We haven't looked at cul-de-sac improvement necessarily or doing a half closure.
No.
But that's something that we could take a second look at, given its proximity to the studio ingress and egress, because I'm sure they're coming out, as we've observed, coming out.
In morning traffic, they come into the studio.
Is it more of a morning issue or a?
Well, it's both, but for me, it's mostly the morning issue because they start like at 5 a.m. On that street.
Okay.
I was wondering why on River Lake Drive, yeah. Why can't people turn left on the ends? Why do they restrict left turns? That would solve a lot of our problems in the morning. If they would allow people to, that's a non-residential street, by the way.
It is restricted, doesn't it? No left turns
Yeah.
restricted,
Yeah,
but it's, people are doing it.
I've seen people do it.
Yeah,
Usually, they'll turn right and go into gate one. But if they would make it so that people can turn left on the ends, that would reduce our morning traffic on Culver. I think people would use that to get into the studio.
so if I'm understanding you correctly, one of the things you'd like this phase 2 effort to consider is revisiting one of the phase 1 measures. Okay, I mean, it's certainly.
All that property is owned by the same guy. You guys can do it. So, when they design those entrances, the angle is all like it's coming from downtown
Mhm.
to dissuade traffic from coming north. And I knew no one would do, people don't really want to, but that was the idea.
Right.
That no one would use our neighborhood to go to.
Right. We recognize it's an issue, just the sudden and permeability of the community, remains attractive, for that type of a cut through. If it could effectively be, even reduced to a point where it's just partially studio related, not regional, that would be partial win. But we understand your concerns.
Are there any other questions?
Any other questions? I think for the next presentation, what we're going to propose to the city is I think you already have enough background as to how we got to this point. But I think having some work sessions in breakout groups, based on what we come back as far as refinements are concerned, for sort of final input, would be helpful. Not only for us, in the city, but for you as a community, as it concerns building consensus.
Sorry, couple of slides, couple of things we were talking about, these videos. Simon has created our website. Last year, we launched January, right? We're about 2024. So rhna.cc will get you to the website and your finance, whatever, all kinds of articles and news, like to see what's happening with the city's general plan. And so there's lots of information on the site, rhna.cc. We will take you to website. Oh, yeah, you can put your email on that site now. Get rid of the newsletters and, yeah, Facebook, you blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Very visible.
Before more you leave, one of the things that we wanted to get some direct feedback on, actually the city, how do you feel about the roundabouts that were implemented on Higuera? As we explore more robust forward stops, moving those be better. We want them to remain and have forward stops.
Actually, talking about that. It's also fine, except for the noise now. People stopping, speaking break, talking. So there is that, I'm just saying that, yeah, so to make it breaks to work better than that quickly, acceptable now, like it's something that is bothering me, so I'm like, in fact, does that, in fact, I'm gonna run for it.
I would hope that the speed of that road, it's having multiple stops, building up enough speed. That's.
Indeed. So that is one of the personal ones. I prefer the roundabout, but I'm saying that that's a downside to start.
Yeah. And I wish the roundabouts were working better than they are.
They're not perfect, but
I'm sure they did get it.
You live there, where
That's really fast. Oh,
was one mean you can't have the.
No.
Roundabouts.
No, you can keep them and have stop sign.
They're
At
there.
all the intersections or a few more of the intersections, just to break it up.
I find that they're not exactly the safest when, at the current speeds. Because if you're in the crosswalk, this car, you sort of feel like it's coming into your crosswalk.
Yeah.
As they go around and that.
Yeah.
So, but if there was a stop sign, that would slow everything down and I think everything gets.
Yeah, and frankly, the design speed for that radius of a roundabout is much slower, and it should be really from the stop.
That, at first they all slowed down, when you get in, but now they're going much, much faster.
Yeah,
It's long.
we were out there observing it, and you know, everything we're saying is we're on the data show.
The only advantage to taking it out is that you have better to fire access to those streets, but they are ready to figure out their other access lanes. So, I don't know.
Yeah, and then we can find the fire department sign.
Yeah, I'm all for the, loading stop signs in the roundabouts. Some neighbors who obviously adopted the flag, they were like Simon and the Hollins, they've been around for more than years, and they wanted to get roundabouts initially. Going back to curves and as well as we don't have police monitoring in this time all day, but who's gonna run the stop sign, right? Roundabouts for the people. Aware. Yeah. So it's in the way.
Yes.
So, what about residents only signs?
That's certainly a deterrent level of signage that is a deterrent base.
That's meeting the city said we would do it.
Yeah, it's against the vehicle code, because they are public streets.
There you go.
So we can't restrict non-residents from driving on public streets. Which street is it? Just so,
Surely miss that, sorry.
Okay, so, over by the school, for the elementary. That name is. Lindhout, there you go, Lindhout, okay.
Lind-
Over by there is a street that says, residents only. And so I know I don't go down there anymore, but I used to, it made it easier. So the city is using that, it's called street over, so then my question would be, the public city is not gonna look at it, then why are they able to do that? They have to do it.
we can see what that sign is and ask that question
You were also told the zero.
of the restricted.
Because there's no way.
Yeah, there's
no, do anything about it.
no way to
It's
prove.
a sign that a real, actually doing something that people can't ignore, it's much better than a sign that you.
So the street is Lindhout and the school, oh, the school is Lindhout, the street is Lafayette. Irving, okay.
They did a bunch of one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it makes sense.
The other way.
Like one-way pairs. Is that what you're thinking?
They deter people.
That's something we can also look at.
Deterrence.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You have it one way,
Oh.
So Helms and Schaefer.
but the
I give it to the I don't want to add anything to my commute.
So yeah, it's a trade-off that we have to.
Using signs where you can't turn like during a certain time.
Yeah.
period.
Yeah, that's similar to what's on National
Oh.
today. So you can't turn left into Schaefer Helms during the 7 to 9 hour and then 4 to 6 p.m. So that's something that we can, if there's a specific street that
We
we,
could look at that from,
Yeah.
you know, from the left turns in the morning, on the other side from Vance, no right turns, so that's something we could certainly explore.
Place isn't residential. Almost all business.
That's all commercial. With them bladed.
yeah, we can certainly add that to our.
In your example one, say hypothetically, someone's been sitting on the 10. They want to get off the highway, they want to get home. How would you get them?
We'd have to circle around to,
So you would take like the slight left of Venice, your way. Oh, that's a, go straight. So you can direct your lanes. Like you get off the highway, you would go Robertson Extreme. Yeah. And so this would be, you just take a little left on Venice, take a right, and then actually go back.
or take National, Roberts International.
Yeah.
And then to your street, yeah.
Either national or yes, that's your.
It's still a fairly straight shot. You're just going, instead of going this way, you're going this way.
Yeah.
We had to do all of that during all this construction of the highway station and everything else for the last few years.
And we made him have a pedestrian bridge on its. People from Jefferson into the city downtown. It's full of bridge.
Is that still something that's in the pipeline? Is that a hotel or something?
That's dealing with rent car, it might be just for the city, I don't know if it goes on.
Well, they might want to get it.
Our dream would be to have a bridge on the Jefferson that goes into the other side of the Hayden Farm. That would be our dream.
Say that again.
Exactly. Yeah, our dream,
The pedestrian.
God, want the best for all cars. Yeah, to have a bridge from Jefferson in the back of the 85. That would be, I'm saying that's a dream. Yeah, I mean, but the pedestrian might be something to work on, but that's not gonna get to the crowd.
I don't want to be I don't want to talk too much about this, but I did attend the September 25th specific plan of the city. And one thing that really concerned me is that the height restriction change for the main track. So there could be the developer or whoever on these days tonight for certain, but right along the Iona Creek track, we're looking at heights higher than 86 feet, possibly some really large commercialism, right? So at some point, parking structures need, I'm sure they're dealing with all of that, but that's something that I think is asking us in these meetings that didn't get a great turnout from the community that I can see, which is neither here nor there. We needed to put on the table for them to see things and amenities that we want them to consider.
But you know, our entire neighborhood is now built on 6 stories.
Right.
That was just fine to, I think half a mile outside of the metro. So that the California state law, that had nothing to do with
Just the hidden tracks.
just the hit track, but it could happen some, I think it ends right around near my house.
Yeah, I'm a 0.52.
But I guess not to, like I said, not to draw too much attention to that conversation, which doesn't concern your time
It
tonight.
does, because
But it-
all of that traffic, all of those businesses in the main track, which are, those old warehouses are going. There, one is 3 stories, right at the end of our street. But those 2 buildings right there are coming down, they're gonna combine it into one. It's gonna be 3 stories tall and 2 entire warehouses wide. And it's gonna be all office space. They're already starting. And that's the first one. But every single building is coming down. And they're building all new office and mixed use. And all that traffic's coming right through there if we don't do something.
I'm sure it's only the type of housing you can.
But for me, it's not a concern.
Not your concern.
No, we can't, you don't let the choose on California.
Right,
Well, there are
but,
measures to try to change it.
well, this is where I thought it was, yeah, the point of some of the things, just to keep it here to the wall. You know, in these meetings, and you put in your say so, and put in your feedback, in that. How verbal or how written it can be. just do it because they've asked us for all kinds of, I think, really wonderful look up of this too, in terms of the, the industrial track that will flow with Harvard and I was always putting things such as the bollards. Bollards are there for, the handicapped pedestrian and cyclists, but at some point, stop the parking from coming that far over and all these things that will affect us with our traffic, right? The bollards will really, and I know that's not something a lot of people want to see, the metal stanchions at the end of the air. But that really does help the status with visibility and invitability for those who still want to come and go through the big track. I love the idea of the trolley.
Yeah, shuttle.
Yeah,
Some shuttle.
the shuttle, yeah.
The bus takes you to your rental car.
These are great points, and I think that it is very important to, as you consider these measures, not only based on contemporary conditions, but if you know that the development around the perimeter of the track is going to significantly increase. There are two types of cut through trip. There's a cut through trip that has a destination on the board just on the boundary of the area. And then there's a regional cut through trip where somebody might be using ways just to get around National and Washington. You can get rid of those trips, through the implementation of extra stop signs. So all of a sudden, the time it takes, it isn't popping up and giving you a route that's back on the primary board. You've got development on the perimeter of your site. Those are, that's learned behavior. And they're going to figure, they're going to an office every day. They're going to figure out the quickest way to get to their front door. And that could be without an appropriate level of physical barrier, inducing more traffic onto your residential street. So just think about it in terms of that, not only based on the commutes today, but what your commutes could look like in the future, and what traffic could look like in your neighborhood in the future if the adjacent development increases that level of traffic by 2 to 3x.
Oh, it's gonna be much more than 2 to 3x. Because a lot of those buildings we can use right now.
Yeah.
Except for very few standards. Yeah, it's gonna be thousands.
So one of the things is, originally when we wanted that Alberta in there came a time, if you recall that we had to start talking to the businesses in the area, and there was pushback, you remember that? And so it's that actually was one of the reasons why the Alberta sort of never went in the first place, because those today, we can't stop it from coming through. My issue now is that at what point you start talking to those businesses and they track, because once there are more businesses, they're going to even have more, if you more pressure to not do the things we want. They're going to have more leverage because